Today I'm joined by someone who's spent decades at the sharp end of UK technology leadership. CIO roles across NTL, OneTel, Centrica, TfL, HMRC, Aviva, Belron. It's some list. Known in the industry as a tough operator who got things done, Phil Pavitt has now stepped into a very different phase. The retired, but not really retired, world of NED roles, a new coaching school for CIOs, life on the farm, and deep hands-on involvement in charities here at home and across the globe. It's a brilliant story of human reinvention. Hope you enjoy. Phil Pavitt, good afternoon. Happy Friday. Welcome to the third half.
Good afternoon, Scott. You're sounding so American with that Scottish accent. Happy Friday. God's sake.
I try really hard. Well, it's because I've been up. As we were talking about before we came on here, I've been up in Scotland all week, and it's always a really funny thing when I come back down, because even the wife and the kids say to me, "We can really tell you've been in Scotland because the accent comes on really thick and fast."
Right.
And when I walk up to the corner shop or the pub or wherever I happen to frequent, people are like, "Who's this stranger that's walked into the pub?" Even after 33 years of living in the South,
And do you not spend so much money for a couple of weeks, that sort of stuff? And do you eat a lot of Mars bars more than normal? I don't know quite how far does this cultural thing go?
I go to the stereotypical Scot thing where I crave Scotch pies, although Greg's kind of do them sometimes, allegedly, and square sausage and deep fried. Yeah. No, I'm not a stereotype at all, actually. although I do think before I left Airdrie in Glasgow yesterday, I did pop in and try and get a rolling sausage somewhere, just to give me that hit.
Very good. Very good.
Before I ease off and become all Anglified again.
All English.
All English, yeah. Don't say that. Uh-huh. So Phil, listen. What I do at the start of these is I pass the microphone across and let my guest introduce himself. And I always say, I'll take 30 seconds or a minute, and I just don't know how you're ever going to get this into a kind of short candidated version. But Phil Pavitt, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers here?
Great, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to take part in your podcast, Scott. So look, Phil Pavitt, I sort of am a father of two grown-up sons and wives and three grandchildren. I'm married. I live on a farm, which perhaps I'll talk a bit more about in the future of our time together. But I guess my career-wise, I sort of left school not overly educated, something which I wasn't proud of then, and sometimes I'm not proud of now. Although sometimes I feel also it's my motivation. I can be successful without all these certificate-y things, even though a lot of stuff I do is about education these days. It's not like follow me. I'm not a great example in this space. But I got very quickly in my early 20s into technology, into IT as it was in those days, civil service, British Telecom, post office telecommunications. And I've done a very similar job for my whole career, which is to start with was just pure IT, go and run IT departments. That was very straightforward. With some very unusual and very interesting sort of roles. And eventually, by the time I arrived in central government, Transport for London and HMRC, I learned a lot about, the process re-engineering or black belt, that sort of stuff you would have heard about. And I began to realize the two were symbiotic. And I realized if I re-engineer processes and then I brought IT rather than just doing IT or processes, those two together would be quite successful. And that redefined me completely and probably made me quite unique in the UK market, very narrow market. So not so unique in front of millions, unique in front of tens or ones, which allowed me to do both. So businesses wanted their IT change, but recognized that to change their processes. So my next career leaps after that, sort of Aviva and Specsavers were around trying to bring both those skills together, running IT, but re-engineering the business to re-engineer IT. And that became quite a mantra for me. Very fortunate, I've just stepped away from being a full-time entrepreneur, to being an entrepreneur from a full-time corporate role. My last job, Belron, who own in the UK Autoglass, my job was running IT, but also re-engineering the business, as well as, of course, looking after cyber and data and innovation and all those really exciting parts of IT. So really interesting journey, probably been quite reflective the last couple of years as I began to consider the end of my corporate day-to-day years. And now I'm sort of in my first 7 or 8 weeks of retirement, which is my version, by the way, of retirement. which for most people be a full-time job. But let's not worry about that too much at the moment.
I love that. I love that, the way you say retirement. But, and for those who may not watch this and just listen, Phil just the speech marks, retirement, because retirement has got, many different guises. We'll come on and talk about that. So what's really interesting when I was we've known each other for, I don't know, certainly more than 20 years, isn't it?
20 years, yeah.
20 years plus. And when I was doing my reputation and all that kind of stuff, what did come out to me, part of my research, but part just knowing you well, is all this stuff that you do outside of the corporate life, as it were, and we'll come on and talk about that. But I think many people will know you by reputation. Mm-hmm. Right? And, sometimes that reputation would be a slightly fearsome reputation. Whenever I mention Phil Pavitt, they go, "Oh, Phil Pavitt, scary, scary, scary." And just to play to that point, do you remember the first time we met?
Was this in your IBM days or before that?
No, it was before that. It was when I was in Mastech, and I come up to
Mastech, yes.
So I come up to see you at TFL in London. So again, 20 plus years, and you organised a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, because you are one of these kind of like very strange beings that gets up very early in the morning and starts work very early in the morning. And you dragged us in for a 7 o'clock meeting, I think it was. And I had probably a kind of hour and a half journey from outside of town. And do you remember how long the meeting lasted?
Not very long, I think it's fair to say. I think your content and contribution to my day, I decided were quite low. So it's time to move on.
And here I'm still here 25 years later.
I know.
But I think it was about 15 minutes or maybe 20 minutes. And I'm going to put that down to my boss at the time as opposed to me myself. I was sitting there going, oh my God, I've barely woken up here and Pavitt's ripping me one and I'm out of his office at 7:20 in the morning. The good thing was I beat all the queues in the local coffee shops that morning. to get my breakfast. So fearsome by reputation, but I as I say, I've got to know a very different side of you, and I'm really looking forward to exploring that a bit more with you now. But let's just pause a little bit on the coaching piece and the stepping away from full-time executive life. And I'm kind of interested in what made you do it now, because I think you've mentioned the R word to me on and off for probably at least 5, maybe 10 years. Yeah. So why now?
So look, I want to be candid with you. I got to be honest. Retirement comes to all of us, whether we like it or not. We either get retired or we choose to retire. So first thing is the opportunity I've had now, and Belron have been brilliant for me. I have chosen when to retire. And it's not like it was, being thrust on me. It's my choice. And that's a very important thing. If you get a chance to choose anything in your career, that even if those choices are tough, is a good thing. There's no getting away from it. 44 years, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. The last few jobs, traveling, flying 100 times a year plus, huge power, huge responsibility, huge budgets. It is really hard to retire. I'm fine about retirement. Now, remember, I'm a change agent. I'm fine about change. No, I'm not. And even in these last 7 or 8 weeks, to be absolutely candid, I can tell you probably 2 days, most definitely one, where I woke up and suddenly thought, is this a mistake? I felt very low. I felt very demotivated. Me, a diary, yes, from 7 o'clock, meeting people like you in the morning to 7 at night, meeting more people like you maybe. Suddenly, you've got 2 things in your diary for a whole day. You're like, is this life? So I'm not saying it was an easy choice. I would say I wasn't pushed into it by the business, but I was pushed along by my own family, who said to me, look, first of all, health-wise, this cannot be great for you. And if you want to have health to do another series of quite impactful things in your life, how does that work? I've got I'm going to say aggressive because I take after my wife, obviously, grandchildren. I'm only joking, grandchildren. He kept saying, well, I remember my older granddaughter, she's only 9, but, I went back to America a few months ago. She said, but Granddad, you say you're going back to fix stuff. When does it get fixed? That's a great question, because there is no... it's not that you can tie a bow, especially in technology. You move it along, you don't finish it. And all those things sort of crowded into my decision making to make the big choice. And I made the choice a year before it actually was carried out. But don't get me wrong, there's not the odd moment during that year, and even since, where I said, am I really sure about this? And I am very planful. I haven't sort of crashed and said, right, what do I do now? There is a journey I've been preparing for, but it doesn't necessarily prepare how you feel. Particularly as a man, I can't talk on behalf of women. Particularly as a man, it's I went to a CIO meeting recently, and I haven't got my act together properly yet. And I met this CIO. He said, "Well, I'm the CIO of," and he named a very famous company. And he said, "Are you?" I said, I'm Phil." It was a really useless answer, and we had a great conversation, but I walked away feeling very angry with myself, but feeling a bit low, if that makes sense. So what am I now? So some of the things that we're going to talk about, they are reshaping me, and that fearsome reputation, I don't deny it. I had many meetings where people would come and present for half an hour, they talk for 28 minutes and say, "Over to you, Phil." So I'm not going to bother, because my speech lasts 7 minutes because it goes past the end of the meeting, so I won't bother starting. Some of that is protection of me, some of that protection of my team, some of that's because I was young and very angry. I'm now slightly older and just as angry, but in a motivated sort of way. But now I feel very different. No, it's not right. I feel that I can pivot all of that energy and enthusiasm, maybe even sometimes anger, into something slightly different.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And I want to talk, usually what I do when I talk to people on these calls is at the end, we get into talking about give back.
Right.
People giving back. But I'm not going to do that, because I'm going to do it right now, because, well, first thing I'd say is I think you've been giving back for most of your life.
Yeah.
Certainly most of the time that I've known you. But I want to talk specifically about the coaching school at the moment that you're setting up, because I find that hugely exciting. And as we talked about the other week when we met, I'm doing a bit of coaching now. I'm doing my LM qualifications and the like. But what you're doing in terms of setting up this coaching school, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does it give you a little bit of continuity from what you were doing at the enterprise level? But also maybe just explain to the listeners what the coaching school is going to be and why it fills a major gap as you see it.
No, and thank you for giving me that opportunity. So giving back at many levels has dominated my life since my early 20s, and that's a family history issue, and there's lots of other giving backs, but a really big part of what I want to do is give back to my own industry, which is actually, given to me. An uneducated IT director who knew nothing about IT in his 20s ends up not at the top of the tree, but at the pinnacle of a very narrow sort of set of criteria and career. It's time to give back and to help. And I thought back, probably a year ago, what can I do that I would have appreciated and when I started my job? Now, remember, I've been on a board as a technology leader of a board of private, public, commercial and governmental boards. What do I miss? What do I need? Now, I love coaching. I've always had a coach, never been arrogant enough. I know arrogance often is attached to my name, but in this case, never arrogant enough not to have a coach. And I found coaches could really help me. I'm going to a board meeting next week. I've got to talk about cloud computing. My boss hates it. There's no money to it. And they can talk me through the mechanics of prep and calming down and all that sort of stuff. But they could never talk to me about cloud AI, for example, or cloud computing, whatever, the actual subject, just the things around it. And so that's sort of led me, as I've met more and more CIOs in my time, and you can imagine I probably know most CIOs in the UK and quite a lot on the East Coast of America. I began to realize where I could really probably add most value is to launch a process where CIOs coach CIOs. So there's got to be a coach, proper qualified coach. So they bring all those skills, but in this case, they also bring subject matter skills. In fact, since we've talked, Scott, I've also been pushed on. I'm going to launch also a CISO, a security version of that. So a CISO coaching CISOs.
Right.
So the idea is you get the benefit of coaching, which, as I said to you, brilliant. But now you get an IT person who can talk the language, who's been there. Look, the CIO role is one of the loneliest roles on any board or any leadership team. You never have good news. Yo, I've got something good. I've sold something. I've done. No, you haven't. You turn up and say, please don't hurt me too much. And you do a measure of the last month's failures or whatever. It's a really tough job. And people don't. I've had many people want to be CIOs. And I often say, no, don't. They've done it. And they ring me and say, you're right. It's a nightmare job. And it is. It's lonely. But it has some brilliant rewards. But it is very tough role. And I want to be someone who supports that in a coaching sense. That's not me. I want to recruit an organization that does it. I want to do some of it. But coaches that are CIOs or recently CIOs coaching CIOs.
And do you know what? I think there's something in here which is, and again, this might be in conflict from your very public persona and how people might see you. I do think you're very kind of self-reflective as well about what you can do and can't do, and I'm not going to, well, failures, and I don't mean failures, but where your gaps are. So you're not trying to create a whole load of mini me's here.
No.
Your coaches, some of them will have similarities to you, I expect, but they will come from a very diverse set of
Absolutely.
backgrounds and capabilities. Yeah.
Absolutely. And remember, at the end of the day, my persona at work is my persona at work. Now, sometimes it is similar to my persona at home, but not that often. You can imagine negotiating some of the things at home that I do at work. But at the end of the day, I want to be able to handle any CIO, diversity wise. I was interviewing a female CIO the other day who, can you believe it, deals in trauma. She said, I used to be a CIO. But I've started to coach, become skilled, gain capability in trauma. That's not going to work. I said, you have no idea. Some of the board meetings I came back with after announcing another project failure, and by the way, my list of failures are much higher than my list of successes. I said, CIOs would buy trauma coaching from you. Because that's exactly where we are. So it is that wide set of capabilities that CIOs, I believe, need to be successful.
And what do you see? Do you see similar when you look at new CIOs coming through? What kind of gaps do you see? Do you see commonality in terms of gaps in people, blind spots in tech leaders? Because I think it's, and again, we've both been in the industry for a long time. Now we're very kind of much about AI and innovation and like cool, and things are moving at exponential pace and stuff like that. Whereas back in the day, 30 years ago, it was keep the lights on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Security.
It is a bit. It always changes, of course it does. But it is funny. 20 years ago, all the CIOs I knew talked about shadow IT. All these other departments are spending IT money on IT, and I, as a CIO, don't have control of it. I went to a CIO meeting last week to do a speech or something or other, and all they talked about was shadow AI. Everyone's like, God, the commonality is, and to go to your point, there are some common themes. I'm not here to offend anybody. Most CIOs are very defensive. Most CIOs find it hard to translate technology into business speak. So, of course, a CEO sits there and goes, well, all that person talks about is how hard it is, how expensive it is, how long it'll take, how much more control they want. I'll go over here, where it's much easier and more fun and more innovative and more interesting. That is common in CIOs. I think it's just the way the nature of the job grinds you down. And CIOs have been on a huge attack. Do you remember, if you want a chief digital officer, you weren't anybody. If you want a chief data officer, anybody. And the CIOs each time are under severe attack, according to Gartner, who tend to make stuff up as far as I can work out, just to perpetuate a model. But there's no CIOs, they're all they've all come and gone. There's no CIOs because they're all data officers. Well, they're largely going. And this constant role of running technology and making it relevant is one of the biggest challenges. And that's where most CIOs tend to struggle. And I think most of them feel a bit insecure, is my honest answer to you. So CIOing around confidence, around how you use IT positively, how you're all saying yes, but with a caveat rather than no, with I want more money. Someone said to me early in my career, well, all you talk about is the applications can't be changed. So guess what? We're going to ignore you and buy some over here. and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. A self-fulfilling prophecy. So,
I always remember, I bumped into you in the House of Commons, remember? And when you were working in government, and I said, oh, how's it feel to be the CIO of one of the big departments? And you said, excuse me, dear boy. You didn't say it in quite a posh way like that, but it was like, you were double DG. Do you remember? And like,
I was,
one of your DGs was change. And I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that just to me summed everything up, because technology is change, isn't it? We're in a life of constant change. And if you're kind of resilient and secure and keeping the lights on, as I said, you've got to kind of stay ahead of the curve and keep educating.
You have. And it's all the education piece you mentioned is most vital. AI has been a classic case for us. For me in my career. So you'll have CEOs who say, if we don't have AI, somehow we're going to lose. Well, okay, that's a bit of a FOMO strategy, because I'm not saying AI is not valid. Of course, it's 100%. But what's your user case? And CIOs, rather than just being, in the very early days, I'm back in cable. My CEO then landed in the US. They just put Wi-Fi on planes. He landed in the US and said, Phil, we need a fully interactive telephony system that allows us to have this. And he started describing some features. I went, all right, well, I'll have a look. No, I managed to get one on the plane. I bought it on my company credit card. Can you integrate it? I'm like, what the fuck? Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is that you could say, and I did say for a few hours, very angry with this, I completely set up, but the fault was mine. One, I didn't understand that he thought we needed one of those, so I wasn't close enough to him, wasn't asking him the right questions. Number two, rather than involving me, he felt he had to do something and give it to me. So I was only an executor. I wasn't a strategist or a thinker. And number three, I was in IT. I wasn't an IT leader, I happened to be in business. So I learned from that one incident. So in the recent stuff on AI, people say, I bought AI. Why? What's the question you're trying to answer? I don't know, but we need it. Why do we need it? Because everybody else has it. Do they? And so let me help you understand what a user. See that user case you're talking about there? There's a large language model that can do that, not AI. Yeah. Do you see that one? So the education is critical rather than being defensive. My best career year, I should be careful I say here, was 1999, the year 2000. No governance existed in those days. You turn up, you go, I'm worried this system might not work on the 1st of January 2000. Oh, Phil, have the money, my friend. Have the money. You want pizza? Have pizza. You want to? So it was a bit Wild West. I'm going to be honest with you. And of course, nobody knew quite what was going to happen, and nobody wanted to be the person who found out what happened. Does that make sense? And you know what? AI is exactly the same. This is the best year we could ever have. Yeah. Here's a solution. You haven't got to be a technical expert. The business wants it and want to invest in it. You as the CIO broker, this could be the moment of pure genius. Most CIOs I meet, defensive, worried, negative, trying to control it. Wrong answer to the question.
Yeah. I wonder how many the first task that the buyer of AI actually does with his AI is asking the AI tool why they bought AI.
I know. It is a bit like this. People running and say, look at this, I've got this. You go, and what's it for? I don't know, but look how pretty it is. It's like, really, my friend?
Yeah, so some things really haven't changed, have they?
No, some things haven't, no.
So listen, final plug for the coaching school. What is the coaching school called, and how can people kind of get in touch with you and get involved?
Yeah, so it's called the CIO Masterclass Club, because that's what I'm trying to do, is create a masterclass. We are about to advertise for CIO coaches. If you're listening to this, you're not one of those, just go onto my LinkedIn and message me. A formal advert will come out probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And if you're interested in getting coaching, just again go onto LinkedIn, contact me, I'll email you and we can have a conversation. But we're advertising for people to join the coaching process, probably starting February, March time. Some other ancillary things at your disposal. There'll be experts there on communications, on change, on business case building, and all sorts of other options for you. But the core will be this masterclass. So if you're coaches, in particular CIOs, get in touch as soon as possible. If you want to take advantage of the system, please get in touch, but look at the adverts on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Okay, and I'll drop that into the
I appreciate that. Thank you.
When we push this out. So listen, I want to change tack a little bit here. And when I started out doing what was the tech ledger, now the third half, the things that underpin this are, and I've kind of rather hackney, but people, planet, and progress. And I keep saying this in a rather Monty Python-esque way. I like talking to interesting people about interesting things, And when I thought about asking you, and you very kindly agreed to come on here, I was thinking back to all the amazing stuff that I've learned that you do outside of corporate life. And I tell you when it started for me once, I think you were at Aviva and I was in your office in Aviva, and you were doing your usual pacing around, wondering when to kind of let load your next barrel of whatever you were letting loose that day. And then you looked out the window and you pointed at a church and said, "Do you know that church down there? Was it St Mary's or I can't remember, just one of the churches."
Metros, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we went a walk the following week, and as we were walking around the square mile, you kept pointing up alleyways and you were saying, well, there's a church around there, or there used to be a church here and stuff like that. And then I started asking you questions about it, and I began to realise how important your faith was to you. Mm-hmm. And then over the years, we've talked about the work you do with Send Schools, the farm, and I'm kind of, there's this richness in all this stuff you do. So talk me through a bit of the journey that you've come on, and it links back to that whole, well, actually, I've been giving back for most of my life, and I want to get that out on air.
Yeah, so and thank you for that chance. So look, at the end of the day, I think by nature and by faith, giving back has been in my DNA for ages. We grew up in a very poor and simple lifestyle. My father was a vicar, a pastor, and my mother was a bookkeeper. We didn't really we didn't have cars in our family, any traditional stuff, but not no a happy life, a happy childhood. But I began to realise when I came home from school at 15 and 16, my mum and dad would have 4 or 5 we used to call them tramps in those days, street livers that were having their toenails cut and their hair washed by my mother. My father was feeding them, letting them use the shower upstairs. There was something very different about my parents. Their faith wasn't particularly around the pulpit and all that stuff. I think they did all that sort of stuff. It actually was, they didn't have a bean to rub together. They wanted to help in those days, particularly it was men where we lived in Romford. And I guess I've never lost that image and never lost that demeanour, if that makes sense, although not done a lot about it. And for a few years, work was very important and everything else. But I began to realise I was beginning increasingly to mix with very well-paid executives who often would talk about charity or talk about the company's charity, the cause, and would write cheques. But I never saw them doing it. Does that make sense? Mm. And I increasingly started to experiment with the doing it. Perhaps I'd work out in a homeless centre. Perhaps we would give money a little bit, but didn't have a lot in those days myself. So the doing became more and more important. So fast forward to the last sort of 10 years, I began to realise that the seniority I had in companies, I could help companies give back. And I joined Belron eventually, had a brilliant giving back policy, mainly based in South Africa, where the company sort of has a huge alignment to. So I launched a program called Technology Changes Lives, because guess what? Technology changed my very uneducated life, gave me money, gave my kids money, gave me opportunity, where we take young men and women, 17, 18 years of age from the townships where unemployment is about 70%, 70, educate them in a qualification, technology qualification for 12 months, recognised by the state, recognised by industry, and virtually guarantee them a job at the end of it. Running 6 years now, 700 or 800 people have been through it, and they've spawned many, many other businesses, completely breaking a cycle, in their case, of education and unemployment. And doing that helped me begin to stop doing things in a scattergun way to really come down to, executives often know me now because they say, well, yeah, we're thinking of doing this. So what are you doing? How many homeless people are you going to visit? What are you doing? I hear what you're doing, but a bit like you, are you sleeping out once a year to raise money in awareness for homelessness? And so I've abandoned all pretense and I just do it now. Does that make sense? Now, I did a lot of what I'm about to describe in 1 minute while I was working. So it's quite hard to juggle all of this, but this is where my life. So a new thing for me is I want to give back to society. So I've become a magistrate, fully trained magistrate, which sounds a bit shocking. I now sit in court in what they call the South Branch of Essex. I know, don't do anything naughty there, my friend. But, I meet a whole section of society I never knew existed, where it's simple, they've taken 2 steps to the left. I could have done that, by the way, and ended up in a terrible mess. That's how close some of us are to that situation. And although I'm not there to to administer justice in a weak way, but I'm there to try and make sure that I'm giving back. What can I do to support? And what thoughts does it trigger? Things I can do outside that court process to intervene in these terrible situations. So I want to give back to society. We set up a family trust where me and my wife and my sons, we invested quite a large amount of money. It brings off a certain amount of money. So we give to charities in Essex that deal with children and young people in poverty, or we think a small intervention can change the way that with a charity can change the way these kids live or turn out. I continue the charity work in South Africa, and we run a farm. Now, I've run a farm for 10 years. To be honest with you, Scott, my wife's run the farm. I've run it by credit card, but now I'm actually involved. And here we have 100+ animals. And these animals on this farm, from alpacas to donkeys to sheep, send schools, and a 6th form college with send pupils come every week to the farm, where you get kids who are perhaps deaf or elected mutes. They might not do anything outside, but their visit here allows them to express themselves and learn things and do things. We have home education groups here. We have a men's mental health charity who uses the farm. It's our way of saying, well, we could just take pleasure in ourselves in the farm, but actually we sense, my wife and I, we're here to give back. Does that make sense? Now, a lot of it's now done inside a faith envelope. I'm working now with black young men and how they can become entrepreneurs in a faith environment, which is quite powerful. I'm investing in some startup companies that are only targeting unemployed people, unemployed youth to get. So you can see this thing just keeps going in a cycle, as well as chairing a charity here called Emotionally Healthy Lives, which is about taking children who are really struggling with their emotions at school, coaching, supporting them, and then placing them when they are perhaps in a slightly better position back into school to continue their education. This is the same thing. It's all about breaking the cycle. And it's about young people and children, because I believe if you get those right, perhaps some of the cases I see in court might not happen if someone had been an early intervener, if you see what I'm saying.
I mean, it's amazing. I'm kind of, when I hear all the stuff you're doing, and I remember us having a conversation, I think last year actually, and when I stepped back from full-time employment, and I've been working with the NSPCC and now, for about 20 years, and now Action for Children in the last year or so. And I said, what I want to do is I'd like to do more hands-on stuff, as you say. And you said, well, it's quite difficult to do it in some of those bigger charities. You need to find your niche, you need to find a space. And I'd be quite happy going and, boiling the kettle and flipping a burger down at the local homeless centre. But it's actually quite difficult to find those opportunities at times and to break through.
It is.
And actually, you've seen both ends of the spectrum, from the large, CSR, give back, ESG type stuff, down to the now, as I say, running a farm locally. There's a huge gulf between the large corporate piece and then the hands-on piece.
There is. And I think, like everything in life, I think if you want it, you've got to go and work at it. And if you can't find it, you do it yourself. I think, to your point, everybody, I got 2 or 3 friends, I'll join a homeless charity. I said, great. Look, we're walking down the street here in Chelmsford. There's a homeless person. Why don't we sit down and chat with him? Well, I want to work in a homeless charity where it's, no. This is homeless charity. Now, it's not formal, it's not in a building, it's not in a program, but I'm anxious to see your attitude. I'm anxious to see how you do it. Now, it's not sustainable, what I just suggested, but it does show me whether people are really that willing to go that extra mile, if that makes sense. There's a charity we are involved. I mean, I don't know. There's some level we're involved in. They take alpacas into old people's homes. I said, I'm sorry. Now, our alpacas are wild, Charles. I mean, I wouldn't take them in the field, let alone I'm scared of them. These things, they spear you. But they do. They take 2 alpacas into old people's homes. They trade them. And old people are so fascinated by them. They say some people there who don't say a word during the day, are suddenly talking and communicating. They want to brush the thing and everything else. Now, that doesn't sound like the most, it's not going to, feed all the hungry people in the world. No. But you see, if you joined up a million of those, the world would be saved in this sense, in terms of support. And so, we just help them out a little bit, because it's just 2 people and 2 alpacas on a trailer. But I just found it absolutely fascinating. Just where they are, they've always liked alpacas, in a small niche, they've gone out and done something and then formed a charity around it. I think it's very powerful.
It is, yeah. And let's be it for me, because I know your wife wouldn't thank me if I offered another idea or something you could give on. But I think you could actually, again, coach people as to how to get effectively involved in work and giving back. Because, again, I just know that, executives, people, they hit 50 and they think, I'm going to give back. And it is quite difficult to do it. And then they give up. Yeah,
I do. A lot of people, and I, in my early thinking, you get this whole fractional thing. I'm going to be a fractional CIO or a fractional NED, and I'm going to do one of my fractions is going to be a pro bono. And none of that's wrong, but it doesn't actually change your life and their lives, because you're sitting on a group that does something for someone. You're not doing the something. You do the something, and you'll completely change your attitude to people. And now, when I watch the news now about immigration, not going to give you probably know my opinion on that. I now watch and read all that very, very differently. All right, because I've been there and, in a small way, been there and done bits of it. And now I'm like, people talking about unemployment in South Africa. I'm going, you have no idea what you're talking about. Well, why that? I've been there 6 years in a row. I've met the unemployed in South Africa. It's not what you think it is. You go into those townships, and you and I have visited India many times in our career, and there's real poverty. In South Africa, it's poverty with guns and violence. It's a different area. So now I feel educated that in a very small way I've got permission to speak on this subject, if that makes sense.
No.
And if you've worked in a homeless centre, you've cut hair, you've sharpened nails, you've managed to get someone a food, and you've got them a shower, and someone says that all those homeless are all vagrants. You go, well, that's interesting, isn't it? I've been there. Some are, don't get me wrong, but many are not. And it's really, well, they're all mental cases. Someone said to me the other day, I mean, well, first of all, that's a very inappropriate phrase. And number two is there's a lot of mental health problems, but the mental health probably didn't cause the homelessness. Homelessness caused it. Really? Because I've been there. So I feel I've got a few sentences that I can talk with some authority on that subject.
It's interesting. A good friend of mine works in the Citizens Advice Bureau, not just volunteers. He works there, and he tells me that homelessness is probably the single biggest cause of issues that the country faces. That we just don't anywhere else. People end up homeless, and it just so many other problems are just derived from the fact that we can't put roofs over people's heads.
And you think about those people. What do we all want? We all want affection. We all want respect. We all want to be wanted. We all want somewhere to go when we're down and somewhere to go when we're up. You just remove all of those things the moment you're homeless. The basic integrity pieces that make a human. You might as well be an animal because you're receiving the same level of inputs. Whereas a human has a higher set of demands. Taking people off the street does not meet those demands. It's a holistic answer to it. So. Just as you don't get the impression I feel very strongly about that. That would be wrong.
Really? Do you do anything you don't feel strongly about?
That's true. I don't start any. You know me. I love the word no. And many times someone said to me, "We cannot sort this out." I'm like, "Okay, we can," and off we jolly will go.
Let's just test that. Yeah.
Sometimes that gets me in a lot of trouble in my personal life, but yes, it is a great place. I find the word no very attractive indeed. Very attractive.
It's like a magnet.
It is. It is. And I know I'm being used by some people. They kind of say, "That's impossible, Phil." You go, "I know you're saying that to get me going, but you've got me going."
So going back to the farm, one of the themes of the Tech Ledger before now, the third half is cheese. Do you have any dairy producing animals on your farm? and if not, here's my second idea of the day. You're going to regret doing this. You need to start producing cheese for the third half.
I'm not sure that's going to work. So most of our animals are not bought by us. They are abandoned animals that we get through the RSPCA. We're one of the farms that the RSPCA uses locally if they have to take loads of fish or guinea pigs or whatever. Now, the most abandoned animal, or the animal that farmers want to get rid of, are male alpacas, and so on, because they can't breed with them, or they're not particularly handsome alpacas. I'll stick with them. They want to get rid of them, want to shoot them. So we tend to get all that. So my long answer is there's virtually no milk producing animals on the farm because most of them are male. Although if you want to have a go, my friend, I am happy to set up a small podcast watching you trying to milk one of these male animals. It would amuse me. I could probably raise quite a lot of money for some local charity by this if I tried hard enough. So, no, we don't produce any food stuff as such.
At this point, I am going to say no, and you're going to have to say, okay then. Except I know, but I think, and I hadn't realised that. So that's why I love doing these, because all of a sudden new comes up. So not only does your charity extends beyond just being charitable in the local community and to people, your charity is to animals as well, bringing in kind of like cast off ways and strays. And
indeed, it follows the same theme.
Animals with issues, amazing. Yeah. So listen, I'd like to round up with a bit of a quick fire.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Hardest call you've ever had to make as a CIO?
I think the hardest call I ever had to make was probably at HMRC, where it was my job during the David Cameron years when we had to make some real savings in HMRC, mainly in the VAT area. The business process re-engineering had demonstrated we were seriously overstaffed. These are long-term, lifelong civil servants. And to finally say, is the first major set of redundancies and building closures in any government department, was to be the person who recommended that to the ministers, because you knew how many lives it genuinely affected.
And I expect the kind of impact of that, having to do that, and the repercussions of that will feature heavily in your coaching, because
it will indeed.
Job. Okay, guilty pleasure outside work, and I use the term work very loosely with you.
So I've got two big things I really love doing. So the first thing is around visiting old things. So my wife often WhatsApps my children and say, "Oh, good, day 3 of holiday, 7 castles down, two old churches to go." And of course, all the kids fall about laughing. We have a holiday home in Norfolk, and it's my wife said, "Why have you chosen Norfolk? It has the highest concentration of Anglican churches in any county in the UK, and we're going to visit every damn one before I die." I hope she doesn't watch this podcast. So yeah, visiting old buildings, old things. Just that when you go to America and they show you something 100 years old and go, "What about this?" You go, "My friends, that's like 1 minute of our life." I don't think in the UK we readily and easily appreciate the journey we've been on. I've chosen churches and old buildings and castles, but you could choose anything old, and the journey goes back hundreds and hundreds. It's an amazing journey. And my second pleasure is classic cars, American classic cars. I have 3 of my own. I love collecting them, looking after them, showing them off. I don't get many miles to the gallon. I guess at some stage I'll have to convert them to something electric, or I'll get buried with them. But that's my other guilty pleasure.
That'll be the number 3. But the third bit of advice I give today, being a sustainability kind of advocate, get those cars converted into some low emission fuel.
Yes.
Okay, and next question, and this may link to the previous one, I don't know, but I'm not going to second guess. Favorite place of peace?
Favorite place, very good. I mean, on my day-to-day here, we have a room that's like a library. I love being up there. The views are great, and you can smell books, if that makes sense. And we've got a few things in there. If I've got to think about things and write things and contemplate things. But my favourite place of peace, I guess, is a place called Lindisfarne. You may have heard it's also known for other people as the Holy Island. That's not the massive connection, but it's a place with 2,000 years of history that goes back, Cuthbert and so on. And I go there reasonably regularly and just walk around for a few days, and everything just gets back in context, if that makes sense. And you can go to a church service there at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. You hear an Anglican service in Latin that's been listened to by Edward Confessor, by Richard III, by Henry IV, by St Mary, Queen of Scots. They all heard exactly the same words at exactly the same time. And I just sit in one of the seats that they sat in. I don't know that bit, but the church hasn't changed inside. And you just think, my connection, my piece is around connection. Where do I feel connected? And there I really do feel connected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Okay. I mean, there's been lots of advice not always sought that's been given, if that's the same thing. And not all advice has been given without swear words involved. But let me give you one that I thought. So it is a phrase. It's a famous phrase, but it means a lot to me personally. The phrase says this: "Remember, in time, I will forget what you said. I will forget what you did, but I'll never forget how you made me feel." And for someone who feels it comes over exceptionally confident, abrasive, aggressive, in control, that's quite a lot of front in there, perhaps acquired these days. But at the end of the day, how you feel about stuff is how, therefore, confident you come. And so I'm always very conscious that people I leave behind now in a meeting or in an email or in a conversation, I want them to feel big, to feel good. They may forget what I said and did, but did they feel inspired? Did they feel encouraged? Did they, that feeling big is very powerful.
Brilliant. And finally, one word that describes the real Phil Pavitt.
Phil Pavitt, my goodness, one word. I'm going to say transparent. Look, I'm an East End boy, pretend, Romford. I'm a Romford boy, whatever chap boy is. People often compliment me, which is very kind of them, and they either use the word passion or transparent. So I guess other 2 single words. But, at the end of the day, I try and be political. I try and have an agenda. I run out of energy within about 30 seconds. So if you don't like it, it doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to go somewhere else where someone does like it. I'd rather be known for being transparent, if that makes sense. And I guess passion soon after that, and you can probably tell from your conversation, here I am retired. It's not going well, is it? Passion, energy. There's still a world to change, and I want to be part of it.
I think that's amazing, and I'm going to wind up now, but thank you ever so much for coming on. And if I go back to the top of this, and I think we started talking about retirement, and I just don't think Phil Pavitt will ever retire. Like I think he might stop at some point,
Yeah.
but I don't think the word retirement comes into your vocabulary. And actually, it appears to me you're just ramping up something that you've been doing for a long time. You're actually adding to it with a coaching business, which I think is brilliant, by the way. I'm
Yeah.
kind of, this kind of taking your learnings and sharing them and pulling together a gang and a group of people with similar learnings and different learnings in the task
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
helping develop, and deliver a better world of technology is great. But your charity work and everything that you do, both in terms of corporate and hands-on, is just amazing and
Right.
genuinely genuine. I just love talking to you about that stuff, and
No, thank you, Scott.
I feel honoured to know you, genuinely, and to class you as not only a kind of client and colleague, but a friend over the past 20 years.
Indeed. Indeed. Well,
So
I'd rather burn out than fade out, my friend. So let's see some of that.
I think there's a bit of rock and roll in there, isn't there? Bill, thank you. I'll let you get on with your day, and I will catch up with you soon.
Appreciate that. See you soon. Thank you.
Cheers.